Every year, around the time of the Super Bowl, I make a prediction for the following season just to see how poorly it ages. This year, I decided why not do it for YouTube? So let's embark on this adventure and see how wrong I will be in a year from now. Now, as I was running through drafts of the script, I was going to start with my coaching landing spot predictions. But as you can see, they have all been completed, so there isn't much to say here, unless Andy Reid retires and the Chiefs bring in Bill Belichick, like the rumors I've been hearing. Because if they will do that, nothing else in this video will matter because the evil empire will be back and they will rule the NFL until the end of time. But we don't have to worry about that, right? Right? Before we kick off the big predictions, I'll give my current Super Bowl prediction for the big game today. I think it'll be a close game. I think Chiefs will repeat with a 31-28 victory, and Patrick Mahomes will win Super Bowl MVP yet again for the third time. Yay. Now let's get on to free agency. Now let's meet the 2024 QB free agency class. As you can see, we have Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill, and Uncle Rico. Gardner Minshew's his name. Now Baker Mayfield, he had a great season in Tampa this season, and I doubt they'll let him leave. So I think he signs an extension with them. Now for Kirk Cousins, I see two main options for him. I see Minnesota and Atlanta. Right now, I'm leaning towards Atlanta, but I could really see either way, especially since Minnesota struggled this year without him. But for the sake of this, I think he's going to Atlanta. Next, Ryan Tannehill. And Pittsburgh's already made a huge list of mistakes that really wrecked their offense. Like, let's see, Matt Canada, Arthur Smith, drafting Kenny Pickett. I think they'll add to that list with Ryan Tannehill. I would say they would be walking down the field this season, but I think they'll need a walker to do that. And now the last major free agent QB signing is Gardner Minshew. He almost led the Colts to the playoffs if it wasn't for Shane Steichen putting in a third string running back in a crucial situation when they have Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor. So he should have some decent market value. And at worst, he's going to be helping with the development of a young QB like he was doing in Indianapolis. So I think teams such as Tennessee, Las Vegas, and the New York Giants will be some top names competing for his services. But I think he chooses Las Vegas because Antonio Pierce is building that culture, and they have a lot better weapons compared to his other options. But I still have two major quarterback moves. The first being Russell Wilson. He's likely going to be released, and I think his top destinations will be Vegas, Minnesota, Atlanta, and New York. But I have Kirk going to Atlanta and Minshew going to Vegas, so his destination's really going down to Minnesota and New York. And at the end of the day, I think he chooses Minnesota because there he will have weapons galore and he'll be just like a redneck in a gun store. Last but not least, we have the quarterback everybody's been waiting for, Justin Fields. He's likely going to be traded this offseason because the Bears ended up with number one pick thanks to Carolina, and he will likely be traded during the first round of the draft. I think the top teams that will give Chicago a call for Justin Fields are the Tennessee Titans and the New York Giants. Tennessee's quarterback situation isn't too favorable with Will Levis and Malik Willis, and they just spent a high draft pick on Will Levis. So I think they'd rather take a shot on somebody who's already proven themselves rather than just take another shot in the dark in the draft. As for the Giants, the Daniel Jones experiment hasn't been working out, and the offense stinks worse than the streets of New York. But at the end of the day, I think the Tennessee Titans will win the field sweepstakes, and Brian Callahan gets another young QB to work with in Tennessee. As for the skill position players, let's start with the running backs. I think Derrick Henry wants to win a championship, so his top teams will be the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens. Ironically, those are both teams he lost to in the playoffs during his time in Tennessee. I think he chooses Baltimore, and since he picks up Josh Jacobs, and I think Joe Mixon leaves Cincy and goes to Dallas to fill the hole Tony Pollard leaves, which isn't very big at the goal line. To finish up this domino effect, I think Tony Pollard ends up in Tampa Bay to help out Baker Mayfield in the backfield. As for the other two running backs, I think Eckler stays in LA because Jim Harbaugh, and I think Saquon Barkley goes to Chicago to strengthen up their offense even more. I'm going to finish this segment with the wide receivers, and I know what you're going to comment. There's a lot more positions than just quarterback, running back, and receiver. This video is garbage. But I think a lot of the defensive free agents are getting franchise tagged, such as Chris Jones and Brian Burns. That is not Brian Burns. But I think a lot of the top defensive free agents are getting franchise tagged, like Chris Jones and Josh Allen, or getting extensions like L'Jarius Sneed and Jalen Johnson. Plus, for offensive lines and tight ends, there isn't a lot of top free agents in those positions. So once again, this is my predictions, and only time will make my words age like milk. Now let's start with the wide receivers. Now I think T. Higgins reunites with his former Clemson teammates in Jacksonville, officially making them the Jacksonville Clemson Tigers. This will force Calvin Ridley out, and I think he ends up in Chicago to help round out their offense. Now this means Darnell Mooney ends up in Kansas City to give them some wide receiver help, and he fits perfect with his 51% catch percentage rate, looking at all of Kadarius Toney's drops this season. I think Michael Pittman Jr. stays in Indy, and I think Mike Evans leaves Tampa and continues his 1,000-yard season streak in Houston. Now, the two biggest wide receiver trades of the offseason. First, Davante Adams. I think he gets traded to New York because Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams learned how hard it is out in the real world without each other. And I think Jerry Jeudy gets sent to Carolina, which is a really weird way to spell purgatory. As for the mock draft, I don't watch much college football. I scout QBs and that's about it. So I used walterfootball.com for the mock draft. I don't want to steal their content, so make sure to check out their website. I use them quite a bit for football information. But a quick overview: the Bears draft Caleb Williams, Commanders draft Drake May, Patriots draft Jaden Daniels, Cardinals Marvin Harrison, Chargers Brock Bowers, and for the other top QBs, Bo Nix goes to Denver at number 12. Michael Penix goes to Minnesota in the second round. And J.J. McCarthy, he ends up in Vegas in round 3, which is going to be a direct division rival to his college coach. On to the season predictions. I'm going to go division by division, then wrap up with the playoff picture, championship games, awards, and my Super Bowl prediction. Starting with the AFC East, I think the only clear placing in this division is the Patriots in the basement. They went from perennial Super Bowl contenders to perennial basement residers. Now, on to the Buffalo Bills. I think they will finish first in the division, but I can see them finishing as low as third because of how tough this division is. It's hard to bet against Josh Allen winning the division, but if you want to make really good money, make sure to bet against him in the playoffs. Last year, I had a bad feeling that all this Jets hype was not going to live up to expectations, and I was right. Now, as long as Aaron Rodgers doesn't follow the footsteps of his predecessor, Brett Favre, and leave to Minnesota this year, I think the Jets will have a very good year this year. This division is really tough, and like the Bills, I think their floor is third place, but their ceiling is first place. I think they will finish second, though. And now we have the Miami Dolphins, and we saw two very different Dolphins teams this last year. We had a 70-20 Dolphins, and then we had a getting blown out by the Bills Dolphins. I think their ceiling is immaculate, but I think Tua can only take this team so far. I think the ceiling and floor is the same as the prior teams, but I think they will finish third based off what we've seen from this team since 2020. On to the AFC North, and I'm going to start off with a very bold prediction. It is so bold that I don't think anyone is going to be able to guess what it is. It is so bold that I think I could get fired from my job because of this prediction. The prediction is Mike Tomlin gets a winning season. Yep, you heard it here first. I think Mike Tomlin is going to pull another winning season out of his ass like he has for the past 3 seasons. I think this will place them in third place in the division. Now, I think the Bengals and Ravens are going to be very competitive this year. Joe Burrow is back with a vengeance, and he is one you cannot bet against. But Lamar has some narratives he needs to shake too. He can't beat Mahomes in the playoffs. He is a big game QB. He needs to shake those narratives, and I think he's going to come out firing this season. Plus, both of these teams have brand new running backs in the backfield with my prediction. I think these teams could both very easily be number one seeds, but only one can win the division. I think the 2024 AFC North champion will be the Cincinnati Bengals. If they play each other on week 18, there's a very good chance that it's going to be Sunday Night Football to decide the division. As for the Cleveland Browns, it is very unlikely their defense stays that dominant in back to back seasons, and their fully guaranteed $230 million quarterback, who I will not name, prefers to spend his time getting massages rather than practicing football. He got outperformed by a 38-year-old Joe Flacco, who was more elite than he ever was in his whole career. I think with this, the Browns' collapse returns them back to the basement, where they will dwell for another quarter century. On to the South. We start with a not so South team with the Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson looked good at the beginning of the season, but he could not stay healthy to save his life. And it makes it hard to make a full judgment on him. Plus, we've seen many good rookie QBs in the past regress after the rookie seasons. Examples such as Baker Mayfield and Mac Jones. If he stays healthy, who knows if he can hold that form? And if he doesn't stay healthy, they don't have Minshew to fill in his spot and take them to the playoffs. So I think they're going to finish in the bottom half of the division with all those question marks. I think their basement buddy is going to be the Tennessee Titans. Currently, they're in a tough division, but with new QB Justin Fields, I think their offense takes a step forward. They also have a tough schedule playing the Bengals, Chargers, and the AFC East. I don't think they're in a good position to succeed this season, and it will hurt Justin Fields' development and reputation in what could be his last guaranteed chance at being an NFL starting QB. Now, in the top half of the division, we have two teams who do not need an introduction. We have the Jacksonville Jaguars, or if my D. Higgins prediction is correct, the Jacksonville Clemson Tigers, and the Houston Texans, also known as the Houston CJ Strouds. CJ Stroud finally broke the Ohio State quarterback narrative and had a very successful rookie campaign, even taking the Texans to the playoffs. I think this team will only want to improve his situation and take advantage of the low cap hit he has before his big payday. Meanwhile, the Jaguars struggled in T-Law's rookie season, then had a very strong stretch to end the 2022 season and to start the 2023 season before T-Law's injury halted their momentum. I think both these teams have a very strong shot of winning the division, but I'm leaning towards the Jaguars because of how weak the second place schedule is in the AFC this year, especially for the AFC East and South, where they have to play the Browns and Raiders. Meanwhile, the first place schedule would consist of the Ravens and the Chiefs. On to the AFC West. Chiefs won the division, extending their streak to 9 seasons. There is no introductory analysis needed. It's just plain and simple there. I think Harbaugh's Chargers are going to take a step forward. Everyone saw what he did with those terrible San Francisco teams at the end of the 2000s. They went from 6-10 to 13-3 overnight. He turned Alex Smith from a bust to a game manager. Now imagine what he could do with this playoff contender and what he can do with Justin Herbert, who is stuck with the Chargers curse. I have no doubt in my mind he turns this team around and punches them a playoff ticket at second place of the division. On to Vegas. Antonio Pierce has this team turned around, but there's still a lot of holes on this roster. I think they get a good bridge QB, Minshew, in this prediction, but Devontae Adams gets traded to New York. Josh Jacobs left in free agency. I think he keeps this team around 500, but I think that is third place because of the mess Denver is in. Denver releases Russell Wilson, leaving them with a massive dead cap hit. They will likely bring in some younger QBs along with drafting one. This team will not have a good season. I think they finish last, but given their situation, Sean Payton gets some leeway. We already gone over the division winners, but in recap, I think Buffalo, Cincy, Jacksonville, and Kansas City will win their divisions. Now for the wildcard teams, I think Baltimore, Los Angeles, and New York get into the playoffs. Some honorable mentions being the Houston Texans, Miami Dolphins, and a Mike Tomlin miracle in Pittsburgh because somehow he's in the hunt every season. Now for my AFC Championship prediction, I think the most likely one will be Baltimore versus Kansas City. But I think you can see Cincy or Buffalo in this game too. With Lamar on his revenge tour versus the QB you can't bet against, I'm going to do something really stupid here. And a year from now, you'll probably hear me say I shouldn't do this. But I'm going to bet against Mahomes and put Lamar and the Ravens in the Super Bowl. I'm likely still betting the Chiefs on the Super Bowl futures though, but Lamar will be going to his first Super Bowl of his career and will be trying to take his name off the list of the only QB to win multiple MVPs but not have a Super Bowl victory. Onto the NFC, we start with the East. The Eagles started the last 2 seasons 10-1, but last season they lost 5 of their last 6, flipped into the playoffs, and got demolished. Rumors were that Sirianni was getting fired for that collapse, but he got to keep his job, but he had to revamp the coaching staff. They may be regaining momentum, but I think they are just delaying the inevitable. For a bold prediction, I think this team collapses, Sirianni gets fired midseason, and Kellen Moore takes over as interim head coach. I think this team still finishes third in the division ahead of the Washington Commanders. I think Drake May will be an all-right quarterback, but I don't think he's going to be number 2 pick worthy. Commanders may be trading away Jonathan Allen, and they decided to fire head coach who choked the Super Bowl away in the NFC South and heavily relied on an MVP quarterback in his tenure with said NFC South team, with a coach who choked the Super Bowl away in the NFC South and heavily relied on an MVP quarterback in his tenure with said NFC South team. I would say the Commanders are taking 1 step forward and 3 steps back, but that implies they're taking steps forward. But in all fairness, I guess Snyder selling the team is a step forward. As for the rest of the East, I think the Giants take a small step forward and finish second in what I think is going to be a weak division. Even with what we're hearing out of New York, I think Dabble is a good coach, and I think he will be able to put together a season of just under 500. With the talent on this team, I think that's a good record. That means for the first time since 2003 and 2004, we have a repeat NFC East champion with the Dallas Cowboys. There's not much to say about this team. We all know about them. We know how the playoffs are going to go for them. Congratulations on a default win. On to the next division. Next up, we have the NFC North. Let's start with the NFL's most historic rivalry, the Bears and the Packers. I think Jordan Love will take some steps forward, but I don't think we're going to quite see his full potential this season, much like Aaron Rodgers' 2009 season. I think he'll show some of what he can do, but I think that he'll end up finishing second in the division, and this young team will continue to grow and develop together. As for the Chicago Bears, this offense I'm predicting them to have is insane. You have Caleb Williams, Saquon Barkley, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, and Cole Kmet. It's a young quarterback's dream to develop with this talent. With Caleb Williams' ego, though, it's tough to predict. I think this team has a lot of potential to win the division, but he also lacks NFL experience too. I'm going to have to put them third in the division, but I think we'll see the Bears make some good strides and even give their fans hope. But it'll probably just be crushed like they did in 2006, 2010, 2018. I'm not counting 2020 because I could put together any football team and they would be good enough to make the NFC playoffs that year. Anyway, let's head to Detroit. In the NFC Championship game this year, they blew a 17-point lead, and we've seen how those have gone in the past. Let's take a look at a team I referenced earlier, one of the NFC South teams that choked away a Super Bowl. The Falcons were up 28-3 against the New England Patriots in Super Bowl 51, and that was the pinnacle of Dan Quinn's tenure with the Falcons. From there, he lost the Super Bowl. The team regressed in 2017 and lost in the divisional round, and never made the playoffs again until getting fired in 2020. Now let's take a look at the 2019 Texans. They were up 24-0 against the Chiefs in the divisional round. Now, surely they won that game, right? Well, not only did he blow the lead, they did it in a single quarter. He lost the respect of the players so much that they started off 0-5 next season, and Bill O'Brien ended up getting fired. Sure, Bill O'Brien made some bad decisions along the way, but I don't think that changed his fate too much. Teams who blow leads in the playoffs tend to end up collapsing. Lions may end up with the same fate, but Dan Campbell is a different breed. From the minutes the Lions were biting kneecaps off, I knew they had a gem. I think this game was just the beginning for the Lions. I think they'll recover and not only win the division, I'm going to get bold and claim the #1 seed for the Lions for the first time in franchise history. Unluckily for Minnesota, that means they're in the basement, and if they have Russ, it's probably his last shot at being relevant in the league. They'll end up blowing up this team since they have no shot in the near future, and it'll be interesting to predict this time next year, if I'm right, where Jay Jettas will end up and what their future will look like. On to the NFC South. This division is really weak. I don't think this prediction will matter too much because these teams aren't really great at all, and whoever wins will get the 4 seed and get bounced by the 5 seed. I don't think there's much analyzing to do here. Carolina will ruin Bryce Stroud. Canales will get fired. Dennis Allen will continue to keep the Saints around 500 but not get them over the hump. Baker will miss his top weapon in Tampa as they take a step back, and Kirk will step in and play with those weapons in Atlanta. And they will probably take the division by default, although I'm not a huge fan of Raheem Morris. Every other coach in this division will probably get fired, though. Last but not least, we have the NFC West. I think it's going to be a copy and paste from what we've seen in these past seasons. The 49ers are going to be a dominant powerhouse until they get hit with salary cap issues. Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy, with all these offensive weapons, will dominate the division, especially with that defense. They'll be contending for the top seed and will definitely win the division. I think Mike McDonald will help in Seattle, but for this season, he's currently working with Pete Carroll's squad, and I think they'll perform like Pete Carroll's squad, battling out for second place in the division and a playoff spot in this very weak NFC. The Rams with Sean McVay will always be a force to be reckoned with. It was shocking to see the Rams take a step back in 2022, but I knew they weren't done just yet. I think McVay will try to see what he can do with Zach Wilson and if he can develop him. In fact, we'll probably see him get some playing time because of Stafford's injury proneness. I think the Rams will be around the Seahawks level. Last, we have the Cardinals. I think they'll take a step forward with Marvin Harrison, but in this tough division, I think they will finish last. Now for the playoff teams. The division winners are the Cowboys, Lions, Falcons, and 49ers. My wildcard predictions are the Packers, Rams, and Seahawks. Honorable mention to the Bears, who I think will barely miss, giving their fans yet another expected heartbreak. And my NFC Championship prediction is the Packers versus the Lions. I think the 49ers will have a very good shot, but it is very rare for all four championship teams to be the same in consecutive years. I think the Lions are motivated enough that hell finally freezes over and the Lions make their first Super Bowl ever and the first championship since 1957, 67 years ago. To show how long ago that was, Eisenhower was president, Vietnam was just starting, we hadn't landed on the moon yet, and the South was still segregated. Now for the award predictions. I think the Offensive Player of the Year will be CeeDee Lamb in that Cowboys offense. And the Defensive Player of the Year is a very boring prediction with TJ Watt. I think another boring prediction, Caleb Williams wins the Offensive Rookie of the Year. And I think Defensive Rookie of the Year will be Dallas Turner. Comeback Player of the Year, Joe Burrow comes back and wins it. And Coach of the Year, with the Jets taking big steps forward, Robert Saleh wins it. And last but not least, the MVP. I think it will be Comeback Player of the Year, Joe Burrow. Now on to the Super Bowl prediction. We have the Ravens versus the Lions, the runner-ups from this year's conference championship games. I think this game will be close. The Lions will take an early lead, but the Ravens come back and they go back and forth all game. I think the Lions will have a chance to ice the game at the very end, but Dan Campbell gets too aggressive, and Lamar and the Ravens will drive down and score a game-winning touchdown, giving Baltimore their third Lombardi, and Lamar gets his first. Lamar wins Super Bowl MVP, and the city of Detroit ends up burning down after the way they lose their only shot at a Super Bowl. Now, around Super Bowl time next year, let's come back to watch this video just to see how bad these predictions really are. Maybe I have a crystal ball, or maybe I'm just hallucinating out of rock. Only time will tell. And yes, I did use Microsoft PowerPoint to edit this video. Like 45 minutes.